Welcome to another episode of Millionaire's Mind. Now, thank you so much for joining us right here on Ebru TV. My name is Lucy Riley, your host for the show. And as always, I do like to start with a quote. And this time the quote comes from Winston Churchill, who says, "Success is walking from failure to failure with no loss in enthusiasm." Now, just imagine that, failing every single time and keeping up your enthusiasm. But today, I am joined by Dr. Ernest Mbai, and I'll allow him to introduce himself, but he is a lecturer and specializes in economics. And here he is. Thank you so much for joining us. Good evening. How are you doing today?
Good evening, Lucy. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Please,
Yeah,
you can
thank
talk
you.
a little bit about exactly what you do.
Thank you. My name is Ernest Mbai, and I'm a lecturer at the Cooperative University of Kenya. So my area is actually economics.
Fantastic.
Yes.
And speaking of economics, because that's our focus discussion today, that word is tossed around every day and people don't quite understand what it is, what it entails, and its importance in our daily living.
Yes, economics is such a very simple kind of discipline to understand. And, when we are trying to explain economics even to students, we try to bring the real life economics, in class, so that we are not just abstract, but we are trying to make the people see the reality of economics. For example, when you wake up in the morning, I'm sure you may have your day planned out. So maybe you need to go to town. So going to town, there are two aspects. Maybe you have a personal car, or maybe you're going to use public means. And assuming that maybe the fare to town is 100 shillings, and possibly you have 200 shillings. So you'll be rationalizing and saying, okay, if I must board a matatu, I'm going to use 100 going and coming back. So already you are practicing economics. But at the back of the mind, people may think that economics is such a very complicated kind of field, but it's something that we interact with on a daily basis. So it is not so very abstract. It's not so something out of this world, but we deal with it on a daily basis. So even, for example, assuming you are out there, you've gone to town, you've done all your issues, possibly you feel hungry, you want to eat something. Mm-hmm. How much money do you have, Mm-hmm. So you begin to rationalize, and which place can I go and get something to eat, So that already you are practicing economics. So economics basically, as it were, is just a discipline that helps us to understand how to, to allocate the resources that we might have at disposal to the few or maybe to the many competing wants. There are many wants. Human wants are very many. But we find that the resources we have are so limited. So you will have to kind of find a way of rationalizing with the little income I have, for example, if it is on a consumer level, how do I allocate these to various uses?
To various uses. And
yes.
Is there really an importance? Can you live your daily life without necessarily having an economics of how you do things?
Lucy, it is not possible for us to live without economics. It is something that has been there since the existence of man. And it is something that will continue as long as the world exists. Because on a daily basis, we find that we're having to rationalize, to make decisions about how we're going to use resources, not only at an individual level, but even at a higher level, even at a farm level, farms, when they are making their production decisions, and, all those kind of decisions, including even the government. The government has also to practice economics. And maybe we may have to talk about some of these things.
And even as we talk about how the government practices its economic practices, you've said that it's almost impossible to live without economics, but you find that the country is languishing in debt and people on a daily basis perhaps cannot spend or plan on their very small monies that they have, or even big monies. So perhaps you can just comment briefly on Kenya's economy generally. Where are we as a country, and what is the problem? What is ailing the country's economy?
Yes, Lucy, thank you. Kenya's economy has a lot of potential indeed. Because when we look at the basic ingredients, as far as economic growth are concerned, they are available. Maybe we just need to spruce up a little bit here and there. But generally, the economy has the potential to do much, much better. But you find that over the years, we have kind of mismanaged our affairs, our resources. And I think this is the bottom line, why we are where we are. The economy is not doing well. And, if we were to go breaking down the parameters, even to a layman, you'll see that things are not actually working out. And so you find that we have that potential. If it is the labor we have, if it's the natural resources, we have them. Okay, we may borrow money here and there, but you see also, in economics we allow borrowing, but how do we use this money that is borrowed? See, that is now the catch. You can borrow as much, but then how do you use this money? Because this money should be used in order to increase the production capacity of the economy. But if the money is embezzled and is mismanaged, then it will not actually achieve the intended objective. You see, this is now the problem. And so the question goes back to how do we manage the resources that we have at disposal? And so I think that is where the catch is, and which, of course, we'll have to pass this ball back to who? The leadership of the country, because they are the ones that hold the country's resources. So how do we manage our resources in the most efficient manner so that we can now, for the proper well-being of everybody? We want everyone actually to thrive. But if people are simply surviving, hardly, even some people don't even survive properly. So you find that we'll have serious economic problems in the country. Yes.
Right, and what I'm gathering from you is that there is really a problem of mismanagement and leadership not knowing exactly how to utilize the resources and economy that is available. But then does this mean that the government has still not been able to hire or put in place the right people who can manage these funds? Is it a problem really of the government, of the people who are in government, or the mwananchi? Because you've also talked about the layman. You find that they too have a problem when it comes to managing resources.
Okay, Lucy, you find that the resources might be there, but then how are we putting them into use? We have various various government agencies which are tasked with the responsibility of making sure that government monies are properly utilized. But you'll find that the stories we read about in the media and in the newspapers and everywhere, social media, you find that we are dealing with runaway corruption and theft, and even mismanagement, wastage of public resources. So, and at times also, the few projects that we may think that the government is doing for us, you try to analyze the economic impact in the short run, and you'll find that some of these projects may take a long time for them to realize their full potential. But notice that we must live today. People need money today in their pockets. If we are going to embark on projects which take a long time for them to realize their potential, then where does that leave the ordinary mwananchi as of today?
Is that to say that then the government should not engage in projects that perhaps are long-term and that will bring returns in the long future?
That is not necessarily the point. The point is we need to prioritize public spending, because one way of trying to stimulate economic growth is through public work spending, where the government invests in projects which have an immediate short-term, kind of impact on the economy. We are not saying that those long-term projects are useless, but you see, in the short run, we must find a way of empowering the economy or the population, because it's the people who are going to drive the economy. If, for example, Lucy, we are going to build a very big SGR, a pompous kind of SGR, which essentially is bringing in foreign goods from outside. Now, we don't ask ourselves, when these trains are going back to wherever they're coming from, is it at the port, what are they carrying as they're going back? You see, this is now the issue. We are very, very busy talking big, but then what is the impact? We want to empower people, the small people, so that now actually they can have a way of living. But you see, if we build those big projects, but what is the economic impact, the immediate impact on the people? Because it may take us a long period of time. I notice, Lucy, that we have actually spent a lot of money injecting some of these projects, which don't have an immediate impact on the economy. You see, this is now the problem. So the issue is, if I may use the word, misplaced priorities. We are not getting our act right. So sometimes you wonder, is it that we lack experts to advise the government on the right way forward? Or is it that someone is just doing something in order to fulfill their own selfish ends? We cannot actually tell.
Right.
Yes.
Now, earlier on, you did talk about borrowing, what exactly this borrowing is going to be used for, these monies or resources. Could you differentiate between good debt and bad debt? And what would you really advise the government with all the hefty borrowing that they've been doing lately? How should they probably invest it to ensure short-term returns and not just the long-term returns?
Yeah, now, okay, I'll begin with the first part of your question, which says a good debt versus a bad debt. Okay, in economics, we call those debts which are utilized, which are mismanaged, we call them odious debt. A debt which, when we are borrowing, for example, 100 billion, meant for, let's say, electricity and road construction, but somehow that money finds its way into people's pockets, that now translates to an odious, like a bad debt, if I was to call it, it is not achieving the intended what? Objective. So a good debt, basically, would be money borrowed and used for the intended what? Purpose. And when I talk about intended purpose, I do not mean, like I've seen our government borrowing money in order to run the government. It is like a consumer, you and me, borrowing money from a bank in order to consume, yes, for our daily living. You see, that to me is not actually good economics. You see, there are two types of government expenditure. We have development expenditure, and then we have recurrent expenditure. Now, when we are told that the public coffers are dry, the government has to borrow money from the IMF in order to run the ministries. You see, that is actually a misplaced priority, because this money that comes in, that is borrowed, remember, we have to pay it back. Now, this money that comes in, we want to see that it is being used for development purposes. That is actually the idea. So that we can empower the economy in order to produce more goods and services. We want to see that this money is constructing roads. Remember, a road, if we have a good tarmac road in an area, it really opens up other aspects of the economy. If we have electricity, power supply, uninterrupted power supply, these are the things that empower the production capacity of the economy. Proper communication networks, and all this basic infrastructure. So as much as the government wants to borrow, then they should actually rationalize, where does this money go? But when we hear stories of money being misused, money was stolen, money was, I don't know, put where, it really is not very encouraging, actually. So my advice, maybe to answer your second part of the question, my advice to the government is that we need to prioritize expenditure. You see, that is the issue. We need to prioritize so that now the money that comes in, we direct it for the correct purposes. You see, there is what we call fiscal capital, like the things I've mentioned, roads and electricity and all these other aspects of basic infrastructure. Then we have also the social capital. As much as we are investing in the fiscal capital, we should also find a way of investing in the human or the social capital, because it is the people who drive what? An economy. We can have good roads, we can have electricity, we can have all these other aspects of infrastructure, but if the people, the population is not empowered also, to drive this economy, then you'll find that we may not achieve as much.
Do you personally believe that the government is doing enough to invest in its human capital and the people's social capital?
Honestly, I don't think so.
What more can be done?
Yeah, because, when you are talking of investing in human capital, we are talking about proper systems of healthcare. I know the government has been trying to achieve universal healthcare, though, when I look at it, I see it's just something that is like a dream. Yeah, we need also to educate the people, empower them in terms of education, because this is what we call human capital formation, where people are actually empowered, not only on the physical side, but also in the mental side, where they are able now to use their capabilities to increase production of goods and services. So we may discuss many things, going back to education sector, going back to healthcare systems and all these other aspects, you see. And then you'll find that, I know one of the one of the key or the milestones of this, our government, is the talk of the Big Four agenda, though now I no longer hear about it being mentioned these days. Yeah, something else had taken over, you know. The Big Four, and part of the Big Four was achievement of universal health care. But you try and go walk into a public health facility today, and it is a pathetic state. Yeah, because you'll have to incur basically everything. You'll buy medicines, you'll pay consultation and all these other things, and if you'll be lucky, of course, to get attended to. You see, so we don't want to just talk. Yeah, we just don't want to talk, but you see, we want to see action. How can we, invest in proper healthcare systems where, when I fall sick today, should not be a question of, I don't have money now, what will happen, and all these things. I should be able to walk into a public health facility, get attended to, Lucy, let me say something.
Yeah. Yes.
This, for example, you and me, there's something called the National Health Insurance Fund, which is a statutory deduction.
Yes.
And you'll find that employees get deducted this money. But then you ask yourself, what is this money for? What is it intended for? Because if you fall sick today, unless you have a private scheme, you'll have to actually fork money out of your own pocket. And yet you are paying NHIF. What is the intention of this thing? Is it serving its purpose? You see, these are the questions we should actually be interrogating, Yes. So essentially, I will say that the government is not actually doing enough to help us actually as far as investing in in our social capital and even investing in our fiscal capital is concerned.
Right. I just want to digress just a little bit, and perhaps you can talk about why manufacturing productivity is so low in Kenya. We find that a lot of the products are imported rather than being made locally. Maybe you can just touch on that, seeing as time is also running out. And this topic is very broad. I mean, everything that we prepared, we might not be able to cover on this sitting.
Yes.
But perhaps you can just comment on that.
Yes. Now, as just I mentioned a while ago, the issue of the Big Four agenda, one of them is actually manufacturing. Now, Kenya is not a manufacturing economy. And you know the reason why. The reason is that, you see, we have not gotten our act together as far as the primary sector is concerned. What do I mean by primary sector? Primary sector is also the extractive industry. Or maybe in a layman's language, I can say agricultural sector. Remember, Kenya is more of an agricultural nation. And so, if we are talking of our industries, you'll find that they depend more or less on goods or rather on raw materials from where? From the primary sector or the agricultural sector. So that now they use these goods, produce the goods, and then now be able to distribute to the rest of the country. So the problem goes back to our agricultural sector. How can we be talking about manufacturing when we have not gotten our act together as far as agricultural production is concerned? We killed textiles industry. We killed sisal. We have killed sugar. And we have killed many, and I can mention the list is long. Then if we are talking of, let's say, sugar factories, which kind of material are they going to use if farmers are not willing to plant sugarcane? You see? So how do we empower farmers? It goes back to the issue of agricultural production. Because that way now we'll be able to spur, the secondary sector, which is manufacturing. Then we'll also get now the tertiary sector, the services sector now to take off. Because they'll be actually transporting goods which have been manufactured from where? From the secondary sector. But as long as our agriculture is in the doldrums, I don't expect miracles. No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And do you think that, especially, you find that young people don't want to get involved in the agricultural sector, yet the majority of the population, Kenyan population, is the youth. So really, what can be done to encourage the youth to be more proactive when you look at the agricultural sector from the primary level all the way until, when they get their tertiary level of education to do that manufacturing? So what really can the young people do?
Yeah, I think it all goes back to trying to impress upon them. And it also begins with us educationists. You see, we have a chance of talking to some of these young people in a different forum. And the culture of saying that agriculture is practiced by people who are not educated, that is something of the past. Because, in fact, experts will tell you that the future billionaires, in fact, will actually be found where? In agriculture, in farming. So we need to try and inculcate ideas in these young people's minds that you can do farming as a way of earning a livelihood, and not necessarily that you are a failure in academics, So this thing it goes back to trying to, sow this kind of seed in the minds of these young people, and it begins with you and me, so that we can convince them that you can practice farming, you can actually even make a living out of farming, and you can even go beyond, not just that. So let us try to impress upon them. We can only do that through what? Education.
Education.
Yes.
Right. I like the whole idea of impressing upon them and trying to change that paradigm or that mentality that they have somehow been convinced by either the media or whatever the case may be that,
yes.
Farming is not for young people. But maybe you can, before we take this break, you can just talk about macro and microeconomics. And maybe you can clarify that for some of the viewers who are actually listening and watching right now. What is the difference, and then how do we apply it practically into our every other day life?
Okay. Economics is broad, and just like I mentioned, there are two major categories, which is microeconomics, and also macro. Now, micro means something small. So when we are looking at microeconomics, we are looking at economic decisions made at a small level, at a lower level, if I may use the word. Lower level of consumers, and also even farms, and also even the government. But now when we are looking at macroeconomics, we are looking at issues on a national scale, so that it is no longer now your consumption decisions as an individual, but we are looking at the general population. What is, for example, our tendency to consume goods and services? Or we are looking at production, no longer now at a farm level looking at a particular industry, but we want to look at the entire industry. If it's, for example, we were talking about sugar production in Mumias. Now we move away from Mumias and we are looking at the sugar sector in Kenya. So that is now the difference. And so when we are trying to understand economics, we start first of all with the individuals, or at a micro level. Then we move to farms. A farm, even for example, this organization, this Ebru TV is a farm. But you'll find that it is just one amongst many in the media in the media industry. So we'll be looking at decisions that you make here as far as rationalizing on your costs, and also on your, on the output, or maybe if I may use the income that you have generated and the profits you are making. We move away from there. Now we're looking at the entire media sector, and how much has it maybe expanded or maybe contracted and such like. So those are the differences when we are looking at economics at a lower level and also at a higher level, which we call now macroeconomics.
Right, fantastic. Yes. Dr. Ernest, personally I've learned so much, and thank you so much once again. It's time for us to take a very short break, but I hope you've already taken away some takeaway points, such as the government just trying to manage and prioritize on what is important, and then trying to see how money can get into the pockets of people, and even just understanding why economics is so important for you on a daily basis and how you interact with it, even when you don't really know. So after the break, we'll be back with a quick fire segment where we'll get to know a little bit about Dr. Ernest and see how well he is versed in various topics, and I'm sure you're going to have fun as well. So do interact with us on all social media platforms. That's at Ebru TV, or sending in your text messages to 4920. Don't touch that dial. Welcome back, and now it's time for another amazing segment, which is known as Quick Fire. So we've got with us Dr. Ernest, who will be answering some questions. Just as a hint, don't think too much about the answers. So let's dive right into it. If it took 8 men 10 hours to build a wall, how long will it take 4 men to build it? If it took 8 men 10 hours to build a wall, how long will it take 4 men to build it?
20 hours.
Wow, I see how you did the math there and why you're an economist, but the answer is no time at all, because it's already built. The wall is already built. All right, question number 2. If there are 6 apples and you take away 4, how many do you have? If there are 6 apples and you take away 4, how many do you have?
2.
Oh, overthought it again. The answer is 4. The 4 that you took. You have 4 apples. All right. So if you had only one match and entered a dark room containing an oil lamp, some newspapers, and some kindling wood, which would you light first? If you had only one match and entered a dark room containing an oil lamp, some newspaper, and some kindling wood, which would you light first?
Newspaper?
Oh my goodness, I am losing hope, Daktari. The answer is the match. You light the matchbox first. Well, I believe in you now. This is the next question. Larry's father has 5 sons named 10, 20, 30, 40. Guess what would be the name of the 5th son? Larry's father has 5 sons named 10, 20, 30, 40. Guess what would be the name of the 5th?
The father?
Oh my goodness, Daktari. The answer is Larry. Remember, it's Larry's father has 5 sons. So the answer, the name of the last son is Larry. All right, now you have at least 2 more chances for you to get at least one answer correct. If you could live in any city in the world, at least you can breathe now. If you could live in any city in the world and money was not an issue, where would you live and why?
If I could live in any city in the world and money is not an issue.
Where would you live and why?
But money is such an issue. there's no city you can live without money.
Oh my goodness, Daktari, you're putting economics into everything. Let's say you're a wealthy billionaire or a millionaire and money is not a problem. You would still remain in Kenya?
I would still live in Kenya.
All right.
Yes.
Finally, the last question, and it's an easy one, so just relax about it. What is the one thing you believe to be true, but that most people would disagree with you on it?
Okay, honesty.
Honesty.
Yes.
That's a very good answer. That's a very good answer. So honesty for you, you believe, would be true, but most people would disagree with you.
I've seen that, yeah.
Yes, and why would you say that, by the way?
No, I say that because sometimes, like I give this example. Maybe you go to the butchery to buy meat, and somehow this butcher man gets so confused to the point that you give him 1,000, and maybe you wanted meat, let's say for 400. So technically, you should return the change for 600 shillings change, isn't it?
Yes.
But then you find that somehow he'll get confused and give you some extra money, So the question is, what would you do if you're in such a situation? Would you walk away with the money, or would you tell him that you gave me extra change? And I find many people disagree with me on that. Because honestly, the right thing to do is return the money. Tell him you gave me extra change. But many people would actually pocket that money and walk away with it.
And buy more meat next time.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Ernest Mbai.
Thank you,
It's been
Lucy.
such a pleasure having you on tonight's episode. Of course, thank you, the viewer at home, for watching. Do let me know what are some of the most important takeaways that you've been able to learn from this particular episode. Remember, we were talking about economics and trade, and there's a lot of important insights and nuggets that were mentioned today by Dr. Mbai Ernest. Now, I've been your host, Lucy Riley, and until next week, Tuesday, same time, same place, on Every TV, this has been The Millionaire's Mind, and thank you for joining us.